There we go. Okay, so what did we talk about before? We're talking about, first of all, Hanukkah, the Greeks. This is also connecting to what we talked about before about France. Almost the same exact principle. The Greeks with France. The Greeks were a little bit more belligerent toward the Jews than the French were. That's true. I mean, they did conquer the Jews in Israel by means of force. But the main thing about the French and also the Greeks was their philosophy, their idea, their education, what they educated, what their goals, their definition of what man is, and how to educate the world to fit into that definition, to bring it that definition of man. And the definition of man by them was that man is the most superior, utmost value in the world, and man is basically God. Man, you decide your own values, you decide your own principles, you decide your, it just happens to be that Napoleon, in this case, or France, was the superior. And so they could determine what human values are. Like the Germans came a little bit later, and they wanted to force their values on everybody. They had a whole different genetic thing. But the the French, they could, how do you say, they appreciated the Jews. Also the Greeks appreciated, but up to a certain degree. Up to a certain degree. So that's what we said. The whole point of the Greeks and also the French, that's what the Rebbe said, one sign that Moshiach is here is that France is already learning Torah in France. One of the same thing with the Greeks. The whole thing of the Greeks was to defile the oil. That was the main thing, to defile the oil, to defile Judaism, to make Judaism normalized, to normalize Judaism. Shouldn't be any craziness in Judaism. Judaism should be just another, Judaism is for you. Judaism is something that's for you. If you don't like it, then you don't have to do it. Whatever you like, that's what you should do. There's nothing you do for God. You do it for you. If you're a religious person, so you do it for you in the afterlife. If you're not religious, you do it to make it a better life, more success, more, how do you say, calm you down, less frustrations, less anxieties. Right? But if that's the Greek way, the Jewish way is you do things for God. You do things for the Creator. And the result from that is you're doing the truth. You're doing the truth. Okay. So it says that's the whole idea of what Hanukkah was, that Hanukkah was is to bring the truth in the world. And that's what's called the oil of the Torah. The oil of the Torah is the secrets of the secrets. Because what does it mean doing things for God? You have to understand a little bit about how incomprehensible God is. And not only that, how it's sort of like an insult to God to say he's incomprehensible. That implies that maybe he's in the realm of understanding. It's just that humans can't understand. God creates understanding. He creates consciousness. He creates existence. God in that way does not exist. God is not a level of consciousness. God, he creates, on the other hand, the God of the Jews cares about everyone and he reacts to everyone, especially to the Torah. That's what's called the secret of secrets. That's the mystery of mysteries. Right? All these other religions, they have mysteries, they have their mystical books, and they have their whatever cosmic ideas and plans and things like that, and their whole the systems of spirituality and and levels and experiences with miracles, with stories, with this, with that. All the religions have that, and that's talking about what God does for us, how amazing God. Here we're talking about what we can do for God, that God creates all of these other gods and all these other things that people worship. When do we get this oil of the Torah? When was it revealed in a way that's accessible to everybody? That was really at Yud Tet Kislev. Yud Tet Kislev was when the first Rebbe of Chabad got out of prison. And he started to codify this teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which are talking about the essence of the Jewish soul, the essence of what God is, the essence of reality. That. This, what we said before, is connected also to this Torah portion, which this Torah portion is called Mikaitz. Mikaitz, that's what this week's Torah portion, Mikaitz. How does it start? And it was at the end of 2 years, right? 2 years after Yosef interpreted the dreams of the minister of wine and of bread. And so 2 years after Mikaitz, right? At the end of 2 years, Mikaitz. Now, in the book of Daniel, let's see this 1 second, 89. Yeah. Anyway, in the book of Daniel, he talks about the end of days, what's going to be in 1 second. 6. Yeah. This is talking about the end, Kates HaYamim, the end of days. This is the end of the exile. Kolash and Kates means the end. And there's also what's called Kates HaYamin. Another Kates, which is also the end of days, but this is Aramaic, Kates HaYamin. Is there a difference between them? See, in the book of Daniel, is the difference between Kates HaYamim and the Kates HaYamin. So first of all, the word Kates means end, but end can mean two things. It can mean the beginning end, like you have a rope, right? A rope. It has two ends. One end is the beginning, and the other end is the, right? So usually the word end means after everything. But the fact is, as you can even say, there's two ends to this, two ends. So Kates HaYamin is really the beginning. That's the beginning of the revelation of the redemption. And Kates, sometimes the word Kates, the word end means beginning. So Kates, one end means the last end, the end of all the troubles that we've been having, the end. The other end is the beginning end. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Yeshlama, we can say, that both of these things, which are called the beginning, the end of the exile, Kates HaYamim, and the beginning of the redemption, Kates HaYamin, the Sofa Galut, the end of the exile, and the beginning of the Geula, and the beginning of the redemption. I'm sorry. This is something like giving birth, right? A woman gives birth, so she's pregnant first, and the child is in her womb. And what's the end of her pregnancy is when she gives birth. So it ends up that the end of one is the beginning of the other. It's the same word. There's one end of this is giving birth, and then the other end of it is the beginning of when the child is, one end of it is the end of the pregnancy, and the other end is the beginning of birth at the same moment. This is the end of the exile. That a child in the womb is likened to the Jewish people in exile, because a child in the womb is not aware of reality except for himself. He doesn't know that he has a mother or a father or anything. He's just all thinking about, if he's thinking at all, whatever, about himself, feels himself, and he gets fed. And that's the Jewish people in exile. When they get out of exile, that's called giving birth. That's also the end of the pregnancy, but it's also the other end is giving birth. Sometimes that end is called beginning. That's Kates HaYamin, means the beginning of the redemption. The beginning of the true birth of the Jewish people. Kashur, these are attached to two things with the revelation of the oil of the Torah. Bedorot Achronim, in the last generations, he's Gabrus Achoshech, there's more and more darkness in the world, more and more darkness in the world. These karabus and getting closer to the Mashiach. She's Garbus Achoshech, that with darkness is greater and greater. This is attached to the end of the exile. That's what we're experiencing now, right? The end of the exile. And they came and they killed, 1,400 Jews, and the whole world doesn't care. And now we're protecting ourselves, and the whole world says that we're bad. And the universities in America, there's anti-Semitism. America is like the most popular, positive thing you can be is hating Jews. That's like the greatest, awareness of reality and your sensitivity. Did you hate Jews? This is like a thing. What happened? What happened? All of a sudden, such a low level. What happened? says because everything is coming to the surface. All the people that were silent when there was the Holocaust, they were all quiet. They saw the Jews being killed. They didn't say anything. Now they're not being quiet. Now they're coming out and say, we hate the Jews. We always hated the Jews. Holocaust was not such a bad thing, right? The Nazis, we see now that they were really good guys and they were bad guys. Oh, they killed a few Russians also. Okay, but, okay, let's forget about the Nazis. Let's just talk about the Hamas. That's what's called, all the bad is coming to the surface. That's what's called the end of the exile. It's clear what exile is now. Just like a woman gives birth pains before she gives birth, that's the end of the pregnancy. End of the pregnancy. Then she really feels the pregnancy. That's hiskarvos. The closer you come to the Moshiach, this is attached to the beginning of the redemption. It's all showing that something good is about to happen. Yes, also, if we can add on, also in regarding to this Torah portion, including also mainly Sheikhos, a parsha v'yeshev shelifanea, or the parshas vayigash and vayechi achareh. Okay, last week was vayeshev. It talked about Yosef being in prison. This week is talking about Mikaitz, is talking about the end of exile and the beginning of redemption. Next week is going to be talking about Vayigash and Vayechi. Obviously, that must be talking about the redemption. That must be talking. If Vayeshev is talking about Yosef being in prison, and this week is talking about both, Yosef being removed from prison and becomes the king, so that's already the end of the exile and the beginning of the redemption. So Vayigash, Vayechi must be talking about the redemption. This is one continuation. As a result of Yosef being appointed to being the viceroy, the assistant king. Roy means king. The Parshas Mikaitz, this week, Yosef is appointed to be the king, the assistant king, as Yored Yaakov. So Yaakov comes down into Egypt. And by means of this, Vayechi Yaakov lived in Egypt 17 years. So now we talk about Yosef personally. What happened is that Yosef was in prison. He got out. He became king, became great. But that also starts another whole process with the Jewish people. Now the Jewish people are going to repeat what happened to Yosef. Just like Yosef went into prison and he got out. Now the Jewish people, because Yosef was in Egypt, so eventually that was the beginning that Yosef's brothers came down to Egypt. And then after that, they became slaves in Egypt. And then they became imprisoned in Egypt, like Yosef was last week. And then they became released from Egypt. And that was like the redemption. That started another big process, namely us Jewish people. Now we are in exile. We're like in prison. There's all the problems that we're in when in prison. Now we're getting out of it. Soon is going to be the future redemption, and it's going to be out. That's the big picture that's being hinted at in all these Torah portions. Now, Yaakov, he went down into Egypt and he wanted to be there finally in peace. He was together with his sons, so to speak. That was the redemption. Kamo, just like in the years that Yaakov was together with Yosef before the kafsal of Rogzo Shel Yosef, before that the brothers sold Yosef into imprisonment, etc. That was in Parshas Vayeshev. That was last week. So therefore, now we're saying there's a continuation. Vayeshev, Yosef was in prison. Mikaitz, Yosef got out and became a king. Vayechi, that's the end of the Vayechi. How Yaakov was dying, giving blessings. This is all connection to the redemption. Vayeshev Yaakov wanted to sit and live a peaceful life. That's what's called the shalva, the completion in the days of the Mashiach. Since Mitzido Hayamuchan, Yaakov was already prepared for the redemption. Yaakov went through enough troubles, enough problems, and now he was ready for Mikaitz, for the end. Keitza Yamim, the end of the exile. Keitza Yamin, the beginning of the redemption. Yaakov had been through it all. Now he was together with his sons. They were in Egypt. Yosef was the ruler of the whole world. He was ready. Vayigash. Then afterwards there was Vayigashes Yehuda Yosef. Then Yehuda came close to Yosef. Inyan Smichas Geula Yosef Latefila. Then after that it says through Yaakov. Okay, then Yosef. This is Vayigash. That's next week's Torah portion. It says Yehuda went close to Yosef. Yosef was the king, and Yehuda, which is the idea of prayer, Hodaya, came close to Yosef. This is putting Geula, was Yosef. Yosef was the one who redeemed everyone, to prayer, which is Yehuda. And before we say the Shemon Esrei, we say Goal Yisrael, the God is going to redeem the Jews. Until the Chibur, the Yehuda of Yosef, until the joining of Yehuda and Yosef together, La'etz Echad, to be one tree. This is the Haftorah of this week. I'll put it up soon. You Echad biyadi, there would one tree will be to me. David Avdi Nasi Aleim La'olam. King David will be my servant over my servant David. He will rule the Jews forever. So that's already talking about Mashiach. How Mashiach is going to be unified, just like Yaakov now unified Yosef and his brothers all together. And that's going to be mostly next week. And that's a sign of the future redemption. That's going to be true by means of David, not by means of Yosef. But it'll be by David, but still it'll be the unification of all of the Jewish people. That's what it means. It said, Yaakov, that's what Yaakov really was alive. Chaim, Nitzchim, Yaakov had true life. Like it says, Yaakov never died. When is there going to be true life for the Jewish people? Every single Jew that's called by the name of Yaakov in Israel, and the Chiyat HaMeitim, when the dead raise up. This means that Yaakov, that he's the third of the fathers, he's attached to the Geula Shlishis, which is the third redemption, and the Beit HaMikdash HaShlishi. There's going to be the third redemption. What's the third redemption? God took us out of Egypt. And then afterwards, he took us out of Babylon. And now he's going to take us out of what's called the exile of Rome, Agalish Romi. That's the third redemption going to be now. And that corresponds to the three holy temples. When God took us out of Egypt, so afterwards we made the first temple. When God took us out of Babylon, we built the second temple. And now God's going to take us out of this 2,000-year exile that we've been having in the hands of Rome. So that's going to be, the third temple is going to be built. Geula, Nitzitz, is going to be a total redemption, and the third temple. Like Yaakov, it's called house. Nachla B'li Mitzorim, it is an inheritance without any limit. Just like Yaakov that says Ufratzta. By Yaakov, it says in the beginning of this Torah last week, it says Ufratzta. That Yaakov, it says by Yaakov, that Ufratzta, the God, you will spread out. Yaakov, his whole thing of Torah. It says that Abraham's was acts of kindness, charity, and Yitzchak was prayer. Yitzchak was prayer, and Yaakov joins them together. That's called Torah, which is not the case. Avram and Yitzchak. That Yaakov, it says, even though that Avram and Yitzchak they learned Torah, it says Avram was old and he sat and learned Torah. Yitzchak says was old, sat and learned Torah. Nevertheless, the main thing of Yaakov of Avram was Gemilat Chasadim, of kindness, and Yitzchak was avoda, digging wells. That was like prayer. You do it like it's known that Avram and Yitzchak and Yaakov. This corresponds to Gemilat Chasadim, kindness, avoda, prayer, and Torah. Yaakov is Torah. Like it says, Yaakov ish tam. Like it says, Yaakov was a simple, complete person sitting in tents, the tents of Torah, tents of Shema Eber. It says, learning Torah. The written Torah, the oral Torah, the revelation of the Torah, the concealment of the Torah. And there stood up testimony in Jacob and Torah he put into Israel. That's the middle pillar. Briach HaTechon, the middle pillar that goes from one end to the other. That's the Torah. Yaakov represents Torah. That's going to be the force that's going to unify and define and unify all the Jews. That's Yaakov. And that's all these Torah portions from the birth of Yaakov until his passing away, and the end of the book of Genesis is talking about Yaakov. He was the main thing, because Yaakov is the mainstay of the Jewish people. Yaakov got his name changed to Yisrael. The whole idea of Eretz Yisrael and Am Yisrael comes from Yaakov. It's the land of Jacob and the land of the people of Jacob is the land of Israel. Israel is Jacob. The mile of this is above any limitation. The main completion that's going to be how Yaakov is going to be in the world, this came through Yosef. Yosef was the manifestation, the success story of Yaakov. Everything Yaakov wanted to do was manifested by Yosef in the world. Yosef went down to Egypt and eventually became the king of the whole world. And it says that what did he do? That he forced everyone to believe in God. He said he made all the people in Egypt circumcise themselves. The whole thing of Egypt was decadence and what do you say, licentiousness. And Yosef made everybody circumcise themselves. All the men, of course, circumcise themselves to show that, listen, put godliness even in that place. Even your power of pleasure, it's a gift from God. Use it the way that God wants. After shekafetz alav rogzo shel Yosef. Like it says, Elo told us Yaakov Yosef, like these are the generations of Yaakov Yosef. Yaakov was 70 years old. The Al Yadei Shin's Galgal, by means that Yaakov went down to Egypt. After he learned the Torah, Yaakov learned Torah. Kol Mashalamad, everything that Yaakov learned from Shem and Aver, he gave it over to Yosef. Shazo, this is the empowering of Yaakov to Yosef. He gave over Yosef all the Torah learning that he had, and everything. This is the ability that Yosef had when he went down to Egypt and bringing all the Jews down to Egypt. The Torah was their power. That's what we say. He sha'omda is Hey Yud Aleph. Hey are the 5 books of Moses. Yud are the 10 commandments, and Aleph comes from one God. That's the Torah. Sha'az then nase amiti shlemos anyan of Vayechi Yaakov be'eretz Mitzrayim. Then Yaakov really was alive in Egypt, namely that with the Torah, Yaakov was revealed, and it was drew down and it permeated by means of Yosef even into Egypt. Egypt is Meitzar, limitations. All you days, by means of this, we come to the completion of even a higher level, which is Mina Meitzar, from the narrow place. God answers us. We call out to God from a narrow place. Mina Meitzar Krasiya, Anani b'Merchavya, that God answers us from a wide place. What does it mean, wide? That God answers us and explains all of the pain and the suffering of the Jewish people. Suddenly, we'll see it's worthwhile. How could it possibly have been worthwhile? This makes absolutely no sense. So that's right. It's going to be something which is above all sense. God is going to answer from the true wide place, the Geula. That's going to be the true redemption by means of the Moshiach. Therefore, that's what Yaakov is preparing for over here. Therefore, Sheikhas Gama Geula, therefore, the whole idea, what Yosef did, will be in a small way, that he saved the whole world. Mashiach is going to be in a bigger way. Like it says in Pesiyum, in the end of this Parshas Vayechi, the end of the book of Genesis, it says, Vayomer Yosef. Yosef said, don't worry, you're going to go down into Egypt, and Elokim pakod yufkod etchem. Right? They went and they buried Yosef. They went into Israel. They buried him in Shechem. Now Yosef is buried here in Shechem. And Yosef said, don't listen, you're going to be in Egypt. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have an exile. Don't worry about it. God is going to get you out. Pakod yifkod eschem. It says pakod means he will visit you. Meromazes is talking about what it says, Bayomahu Yosef Hashem. God will will add on, Shenit, again, his hand, he will raise his hand, and Yosef means he will increase. And Osaf means also to gather. He will gather together all the castaway people of Israel. In other words, every Jew in the world is going to know that he's Jewish, and we see amazing things that are happening. First of all, when the Iron Curtain fell, so there were hundreds of thousands of Jews in Russia that didn't know that they were Jews. Their mothers didn't know they were Jewish. Their grandmother didn't know they were Jewish. They just found out that my grandmother told me that her mother was Jewish. My mother said that her grandmother. And suddenly Jews just started popping out from everywhere. They just realized that they were Jews. And now in America and these other places, all of a sudden this anti-Semitism is just bringing Jews out from everywhere, right? The Jews, they just suddenly become proud that they're Jews. They're just proud that they're not the people that hate them. And now we can understand what Yaakov said to Paro. Now we can understand what Yaakov said to Paro. And I just want to take one moment. Let's just take a little pause over here. 1 second, pause recording. That doesn't work. Okay, I have to pause the recording. 1 second. Let me, this fellow called me up. 1 second.